Hello, mental health takeaway fans. If I were to tell you that this week's guest was an Icelandic travel guide, one of four brothers, regularly walks the gnarliest ridgeline walks in the country, like Thrib Block, Horseshoe, St Sunday's Crag, Striding Edge, has had a couple of hospital stays with alcohol withdrawal symptoms, has scaled the highest peaks in Southeast Asia and North Korea, and fell down a flight of stairs at an Orbital gig, breaking 7 vertebrae in the process, I think you'd be expecting a certain type of macho, alpha, gruff, Aunt Middleton type. Am I right? Am I wrong? I don't know. Who you're actually about to meet is a far more layered and interesting individual, someone far less obvious than you might be thinking. And having listened back, there are so many takeaways that we missed in the recording. So please get in touch on our socials at Mental Health Takeaways to let us know what you've taken away from Mike's episode. Here he is.
So I'm going to kick us off, Mike, with our questions. And we're going to start off in the same way that we start every show. And it's going to be talking about takeaways. So we're going to get you a metaphorical takeaway ordered up. So I'd like to know, what would you like to order on your takeaway?
Just a classic fish and chips.
Oh, fish and chips.
Everything else,
nice.
Everything else is just too much hassle. There's too much choice. We've got a good chippy just up the road, so it's convenient. The chap in there's got loads of facial tattoos, so it's interesting. You get the local town gossip. Simple fish and chips.
Nice.
Mike, can I ask you a couple of questions around that? I know you said simple.
Yeah.
Presumably we're answering questions about ketchup, mayonnaise, tartar sauce, salt, vinegar. We've got options.
Fish, large fish, small chips, curry sauce, can of Coke. Always the same. Unless I get a dandelion and burdock, because I'm, feeling saucy.
What would cause the need for the dandelion and burdock?
Just a surge of adrenaline going into the shop.
I like that.
Queuing out the door Friday nights, too much time to think, or a surge of adrenaline.
Yeah, you are a life on the edge kind of guy, Mike.
Life has slowed down of late, Matt, so that is quite exciting for me.
Well, I'm here for it. I'm wondering if there's any way we can expand on. So, and did you say you didn't answer the salt and vinegar?
Oh, always salt and vinegar, yeah. Once battered sausage as well, because I hadn't eaten all day. I was going up to Steph's and I wanted a snack. So
there is no finer snack than a battered sausage.
No.
Cool. I have another curveball to throw at you. Just one more about the fish and chips. Does it, as standard, get provided with a wedge of lemon?
No.
If it did, what would you do with the wedge of lemon? Because I would throw that in the bin. I don't need lemon on my food.
I guess I might squeeze it, because if I've been given it and I've paid for it, I want to come and go use it.
So do you eat every chip?
Yeah. Again, I've paid for it. It's being eaten.
I like a bit of lemon on my fish. I think that's a nice touch.
I mean, you wouldn't normally get it on a fish and chip, not a battered fish accompaniment. It's probably a bit fancier down where you are, where in your fish restaurants. But,
what can I say, Mike?
we wouldn't have a wedge of lemon up here. Fancy.
Where are you currently located? Are you in the Peak District?
Right on the edge of the Peak District, in a little town called New Mills.
I'll nod like I know where that is. There we go.
About halfway between near Buxton.
Oh, well, they've got water there.
They've got water. Yeah, you see people in the streets of Buxton filling up the water from the tap that comes out in the middle of town.
Really?
You see people will bring hundreds of bottles. There'll be like people, those big kind of water cooler bottles, filling up hundreds of them from this little spout in the middle of town.
And that's Buxton water that they're filling up on? As in the brand?
Water. It's water. No, it's water, and it's in Buxton. So,
still counts, I suppose.
Yeah.
Very much like champagne from the Champagne region.
Yeah, it comes out the walls.
Well,
We've taken a left turn.
been blown, Matt. That's. I'm just going to let you ponder on that for a moment. So, coming back to your takeaway, Mike. When would you like typically go for a take? I mean, fish and chips traditionally a Friday night. Do you have any kind of preference, or do you just go as and when?
It would normally be a Friday night. Friday night after work, straight to the chippy.
And is that like obviously that's the Friday fish and chips thing has kind of religious connotations, but is that just a treat at the end of the week, or
it's just a treat. If you can't bother cooking, quite often I go up to my friend Steph's house, who's about a 20-minute walk away, and the chippy's kind of on my way. In which case it'll be 2 large fish, 1 large chips, large
Cool.
curry sauce, and a can of Coke.
that sounds good? Well, I think everyone loves the fish and chips.
I'm a big fan. So, Mike, as you know, the purpose of this chat is to eventually try to extract a takeaway from our conversation, like a thing that we can use and put into our day-to-day lives. But I'm just sort of writing down here, routine. I've just find, maybe because it's such a beautiful evening and I'm wishing it was a Friday, but the idea of the finishing work and the routinely going to the fish and chip shop and then either going home or to a friend's house, I just find that immensely soothing as an idea of like, maybe I'm just craving routine. I don't know. But
No, I agree. I find it. I live a very simple life, and lots of that is, I get home from work, I make my sandwiches for the next day, always the same. I massively overthought my choice of bus to work to make it. I could explain at length how I came up with. I've got 2 choices, but that sense of routine, particularly when I'm not doing anything out of the ordinary. So this has really thrown me this evening because this isn't what I do on Monday evenings.
yeah, okay.
And so I was I did have a little fret about what to have for tea, when to have it, whether I should have something. And it did throw my slight routine. I'm very much a man of habit.
Yeah, well, I understand that. Does that mean we're going to need to record a podcast with you every Monday now?
A little bit. I had steak for dinner on a Sunday about 4 weeks ago, and now every Sunday is steak night Sunday.
But Bradders, tell me, how do you feel about that? Because just that idea that Mike was saying about routine, I just feel that sounds like really soothing. And I was also interested, Mike, in what you were saying about overthinking your bus to work. But Brad, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I think routine is nice, isn't it? I mean, our brains don't really like change. The kind of survival part of our brains don't really like change. So routine does naturally bring an element of comfort to us, I think. I think lots of people like comfort and routine and general kind of order. But then, yeah, you get people that are completely the other way, aren't they? And kind of can't cope with routine and like that kind of sort of spontaneity. And I think I'm a bit of a routine person as well. Perhaps not quite so much as Mike, but I like to know my routine, and I'll finish work and I'll go to the gym and then I'll go home and sort out dinner, and it's nice, isn't it? It is comfortable having a routine.
Yeah, Brad, I find your routine a lot more boring than Mike's.
Well, at least at the gym you get out and meet people.
But that's only good if you like meeting people.
Well, that's a very good point.
Yeah, it's an. I once had a chat with a guy in the gym because it's rare that I speak to people in the gym. But we were the only 2 people without headphones on. Because now everyone kind of wears headphones and listens to their own thing, so it's not as easy to kind of approach those conversations. We ended up chatting because we didn't have those headphones and that kind of common ground, I suppose. But I think routine's nice. I think routine is comfortable.
Okay, good stuff. Brad, shall we order Mike's takeaway?
Yeah, I'm gonna dial that in from a man with a tattooed face, and get his speciality. Just out of interest, tonight, right now, Mike, would you go Coke or Dandelion and Burdock?
Only because of the time of night, probably Dandelion and Burdock, because of the sugar and caffeine content of the Coke.
Okay, I'm gonna do that then.
I have an orange juice and lemonade, or a Henry, as we call it down south, but nobody understands that up here.
Do they not?
I was in the pub chatting to the waiter and ordered a Henry, and his sister had just moved to Berkeley in Gloucestershire. And so he was going to take it up with her, the Henry, but I keep ordering a Henry and then having to explain exactly what it is.
But
It's
are you
just
so resolutely stubborn that you're going to keep ordering a Henry, even if you have to explain what it is every time?
And then being charged different price every time, even if you're still in the same pub.
I can relate to that. Anyway, look, Mike, we've ordered your takeaway, and what we'll do now is just have a quick chat whilst we wait for. God, I am so into the idea of fish and chips like right now, but that's not going to happen for me. We're going to go into some silly would you rather questions, Mike, because we feel as if that they are conversations that men are generally happy passing the time having conversations about would you rather. The classic one being would you rather have Pringles for fingers or Wotsits for toes, and similar questions. But the one that I'm going to ask you is, would you rather have an unlimited gift card for your favourite restaurant or your favourite shop?
Shop.
Okay, right, we'll move on.
Decisive.
Well, there is no correct answer.
Well, my favourite shop would be the bookshop in town. Restaurants, I like to mix it up and have a bit more choice. Whereas bookshop, then you get all the choice of all the books. As restaurants, you tend to have similar food.
You're thinking of things that we hadn't thought of. So Brad quite rightly pointed out that a restaurant is more about an experience, whereas a shop is more about materials and sort of verging on not being materialistic, but you're quite right that there's a massive choice element as well, isn't there? That a bookshop is inherently full of choice, whereas a restaurant is slightly narrower.
And it's a world of choice. There's all sorts of stuff you can find in a bookshop, different, million different genres. And your favourite restaurant, you can have a variation on 10 dishes. Yeah,
you're quite right. What are you reading anything at the moment?
I've just finished reading Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, which is... Have you read it?
No.
It's a retelling of David Copperfield in early 2000s, kind of Kentucky, Virginia mountain people and the opiate crisis in America.
Really relatable content. I think a lot of our listeners will be going through a lot of the same themes as...
It's an absolutely fantastic book.
Well, I'm glad you enjoy it. Do you have a preferred genre, or do you tend to roam around?
No, I went through a phase of just reading absolute trash, like Michael Connelly's and Grisham's and Lee Child, obviously Reacher, an excellent chap. And I forced myself to go back and read kind of more literary books and like take recommendations from friends and book reviews in the papers and stuff. And so I'll be working and trying to read a bit more grown-up books rather than just trashy charity shop thrillers.
What motivated that switch?
Because I love reading and I got lazy and I thought I didn't need to be that lazy. And I kept on reading good book reviews and thinking every time I get to start a new book, I go for the easy option. And I've just read some fantastic books from that and chatting. We've got this lovely little independent bookshop, which we call Black Books because the chap is Bernard from Black Books. And just chatting about stuff, and he's come up with some really good recommendations and just trying to... I do a lot of reading. I get the bus an hour to and from work, our lunch break, and just a lot more interest in the kind of samey variation on different murder thrillers. And just to try and have a broader experience.
And have you got another book lined up for next?
Yeah, I've got about 6 on the shelf waiting to see what takes my fancy. I picked up Wolf Hall in the charity shop because everyone says it's brilliant, so I might try Wolf Hall next.
And do you ever... I hope for your sake that you don't. But do you ever suffer from that phenomenon where you buy books to go on your bookshelf so that people can think you're interesting and diverse, that you actually have no interest in reading? I've definitely done that.
Not anymore.
And I'm not
I don't
sure
have
why.
any visitors. I don't have any visitors. So, and I've only got a small house, so that would be counterproductive.
Fair enough. That answers
Steph's
that.
the only person that visits, and she knows how uncool I am, so it wouldn't work.
Because she's met you once.
I'm quite interested in before we got onto that, you were talking quite a lot about liking routine and that sort of similarity, but here you are talking about books and wanting that variety and taking recommendations. It just, I don't know what my question is. I'm just interested in that.
The books are quite internal, I guess. The routine is kind of day-to-day life, and I'm interacting with other people and kind of managing life, as it were. Whereas the book is headphones on, head in a different world. That's my escapism.
Cool.
And so it's, I don't know. You can have that familiarity with Lee Child's and Jack Reacher books, but because it's internal reading to you, it's a real escapism without having to interact with the world, and you can still have, and the routine is still the same. It's still the same bus, and they listen to music and just kind of having that element of, I don't know, just switching off from the world. And
yeah, it's really interesting to hear you say that, because I've always been an active kind of sporty person, and Matt and I have had conversations about escapism and things that we do, and we often sort of talk with guests about that. So for me, like, my kind of element of escapism would be going for a surf or going out on my bike. So it's really actually quite nice to hear just a different perspective, that books are where you get that. And I just think that's a wonderful thing, actually, to know that actually it doesn't have to be this or that, or whatever other people might be into. Like, everyone's an individual, and they can each have their thing that is theirs, that they can go to, that place they can go to just find that kind of comfort and escapism. It's really nice to hear, actually.
I'd agree with that, Bradders. And I'm just going to echo that what I've jotted down under what could be a potential takeaway at the end of this conversation is that it feels like, and maybe with the lack of visitors that you mentioned, but also there was something else maybe about the routine. Certainly the routine and the reading feel like very sustainable, very healthy, I'm not sure what word I'm looking for, but self-preservation mechanisms. So kind of ways of keeping yourself feeling the way you want to feel, but that they're not destructive methods of doing that. They're very healthy and positive methods of doing that. Would you say they are self-preservation mechanisms, or am I just seeing pie in the sky?
Yeah, there was a time when there was a little bit of chaos. I think getting to that routine and getting comfortable with, I think some of that chaos came with not necessarily being comfortable with spending a lot of time by myself, and that routine and being slightly more accepting of that, and just getting, most of the work days are fairly similar, and able to switch off and just find something different to do that I can focus on. Probably know, Matt, drinking was my main problem. Yeah. And to have something different in the evenings rather than get home and just kind of be, well, I'm alone, I'm bored, I'll have a drink. I'll get in, I'll get ready for tomorrow, I'll sit down, I'll have my tea, I'll watch the chase because I like doing the quiz. I'll sit and read a book and put the radio on or put some music on, watch some sport or a documentary or something. Yeah, and it's different, and it took a little while to move from one thing to the other, but I can't remember what the question was, but I think the answer was yes.
I think you've nailed that one, Mike.
Yeah, I think you've totally nailed it. Well, I mean, this is slightly off topic of the podcast, but I wasn't joking when you came on the camera. I just thought you looked remarkably youthful and well, which is nice to report. Brad, sorry, I can't say the same to you. Right, we'll pop on to the next Would You Rather. And hopefully these are sort of opposites for you. Would you rather feel overworked or overrested / bored? Like, which one of those is worse, or which one of those is better, I suppose?
Really hard question to answer. I guess overworked.
Oh, really?
I don't know. I've just changed jobs from one that was quite quiet to one that's potentially a bit busier. But obviously, I've smashed it, so I've made it quieter by doing it really well for the last 2 weeks. When I've had a couple of weekends on my own and get to kind of like Sunday evenings, like I haven't really achieved much. I don't know. No, maybe actually overboard. No, because you're taking out the element of if I'm bored, I'll do something. I'll go for a walk, or I'll read a book, or I'll find something to do. Because if I got well rested and bored, I'd take myself off for a walk to another bookshop along the canal where I can see the ducks and stuff.
Of course,
which is what I tend to do.
This is
but
something.
If you're taking out, if you're saying you can't choose to do anything, you're just going to sit there and chill out, probably overworked. I'd rather be busy.
Yeah, well, this wasn't a reason to bring you on the podcast, and I've only just remembered it now. But I remember there was a time quite a while ago by modern standards, where you had significant injuries from a car accident. Certainly from my own perspective, when I've been injured and I can't get up and go for a walk, and I have to, or when my asthma's been particularly bad and I can't get out and do stuff, that's that kind of over-rested, bored, you can't really do anything about it other than just endure it. That's what I mean. So I suppose actually you've got experience of both.
Well, no, it wasn't a car accident. I did have a car accident, Matt, and I just got a little bit of glass in the back of my hand. So that wasn't too bad. I fell down the steps at an Orbital gig and fractured 7 vertebrae.
Of course you did, yeah.
So
yeah,
the boredom was
you injured
kind
your
of
back.
overdone by the months of agony.
Yeah, that's right.
So you couldn't do as much being active, but there are lots of other things going on at the time, like being in agony.
So you wouldn't recommend the being in agony part of it?
No, that's the problem. Yeah, or going out Sunday nights. That's the big takeout. Don't go out on Sunday evening.
Oh, I'm just going to write down things to remember from this. Don't be in agony. Okay, good.
It's interesting that idea of like actually if you were feeling kind of over-rested and a bit bored, that you could go and choose a different walk and go and see the ducks and go to the bookshop is an interesting one, because it's probably a good solution to both scenarios, and yet we'd be much less likely to do it whilst overworked, would be my thought on that. But both would have a positive impact on our mental health.
This is why we have Brad Smith on the podcast.
In some ways, I disagree. I think you can get kind of bogged down in being rested, and you kind of get kind of inertia in that you don't move. Whereas certainly when I'm working hard, it feels like I've got, there's 2 days at the end of the week I've really got to make the most of. In fact, I'm not a snappy person. I snapped at a friend last week when we were talking about where to go walking this weekend just gone. He said, well, we shouldn't go anywhere that's that busy, or, it's like, he doesn't work. And I said, well, you don't actually work. We've got 2 days a week where we can do it. And if we want to go somewhere different, and there's a reason there's lots of people there, it's because it's beautiful and it's different. We might just have to suck it up and do that. He texted the next day and suggested all these different walks. So my snapping app obviously worked. But yeah,
I think you're quite an effective snapper, Mike.
Well, I felt really bad about it. So I apologised to Steph about snapping at him, but not to him, obviously.
That's fair enough, I think. I love your answer to that, Mike. And we're getting takeaways all over the place here. Right, we've got a slightly more positive one before we move on to the next round of questions. I'll give you some context for this. Would you rather feel interested or inspired? And so by interested, what I understand by that is people tend to be interested in the outside world and the things around them, people around them, and so on. Whereas I feel like inspired is where you are taking that stuff from the outside world, but bringing it in order to sort of cause action in yourself, to actually then go on and produce something. Almost like with your literary examples, would you rather be like fascinated in a book, or would you rather be reading a book that made you feel like, I'm going to go and do a particular thing because you feel inspired by it?
I think the interested by. I'm fundamentally a lazy man.
Yes,
so I'd get inspired by do something and think, I should do this, and I wouldn't do it, and I'd feel disappointed and sad with myself. But I like to be interested in things and find lots of different things interesting. So you're interested in rather than inspired by. I think I'd end up being disappointed by being inspired, but with interested, there's more to learn about it. I think knowledge makes you feel more rounded as a person. So you being more interested in stuff and learning more about it. And
I was just going to say, do you think that relates to expectation? When sometimes if we feel like, I'm inspired to go and see this, it doesn't always live up to our expectations. Whereas if we're just genuinely interested in something, we've got that passion for it. So it's like, it's always going to be enjoyable because it's something we're interested in.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think if you're inspired to go and I don't know, you've heard a brilliant band and you go and watch them and they let you down. But if you're just interested in doing lots of different things, just for just to soak it up and get more experience, then you take it more on its own merits rather than building it up to doing something that you're expecting to be amazing. Whereas if you're just interested in doing, you've got a whole gamut, you can learn more about it. And again, like the reading thing, it gives you a whole wealth of possibilities. Where I think people who get inspired by stuff, they get quite single-track minded about it, and that can lead to disappointment, I think, maybe.
I mean, that's a drum that I beat all the time, the idea that the gap between expectation and reality is where unhappiness lives, and that can be above and below. Just think that the word expectation came up a lot of times in that little conversation there, and that if there was a way, I wonder if there'd be a way of you being inspired but managing expectation in order to just feel free to create something. Not that I need you to be a creator, Mike.
No, good.
But it's just something that interests me. So there you go.
Well, that's inspired me.
Thank you, Brad. It was designed to inspire you. So you'd rather be interested than inspired. I think that's going to be quite a unique answer, Mike. And I think, but actually, this is one of the points where I'll say to, we estimate that we've got over 3 listeners to this podcast.
Windows open.
Yeah, I'm talking really loudly, so the kids next door have got no choice but to hear it. So I'd really be interested to hear from our 3 listeners whether they would rather be interested or inspired, and why. Because the more I think about that question, the more interesting I think it is, and that's in light of your answer. I think if you are listening, tell us what you think of that.
I think inspiration is quite inspiration. I think, Matt, can be quite narrow. I was just we're going on holiday in November, and I've told the group that we need to go for where we're going, but we need to go to the Herring Museum in Iceland. And they're like, why should we go to the Herring Museum? And I don't want to be inspired to become a herring fisherman. I want to go there because it's interesting, and you can be interested in this little slice of life from like early 20th century Iceland. Because you just want to see something inspirational. Yeah, what we were saying before about that expectation, it's going to be amazing, and I have really built up the Herring Museum to them, so I'm hoping they're going to be inspired by it. But,
is that does it deserve that praise? Is it that good?
Funnily enough, in the papers over the weekend, there's a little travel thing that said you should go to this town, Siglithadur, and go to the Herring Museum, which is fascinating. In brackets, honestly. So it'll be my third visit, Matt.
It'll be your first visit.
Third.
I was going to say, because you were an Icelandic tour guide, weren't you? Was it Iceland? You were
not
tour operator?
Guiding. Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. In days gone past. Good answers, Mike. Brad, I think you've got the next course. Let's go!
Yeah, so we're gonna go on to our dessert questions now, Mike. So this is an opportunity for you to speak to yourself. actually, and maybe to ask yourself some questions or get any perhaps takeaways of your own. But what we're going to do is allow 8-year-old you, 18-year-old you, and 80-year-old you to come into the room and have a chat. But you can only have a chat to them for 1 minute. So 8-year-old you is the first one through the door. Is there anything that you would like to tell 8-year-old you?
8-year-old me, that's a long time ago, isn't it? I would tell 8-year-old me it's okay to be quiet. You don't have to fill every silence, and if you don't have to make friends with everyone. You can just be yourself and be quiet and not have to worry about people liking you. I think that would have made me a more confident child growing up.
Mike, I find that ever so powerful. Sorry, Brad, you carry on, but I think that's really powerful.
No, I think it is, because we were talking about this because I was quite a quiet child. In fact, it was something that came up on my episode that I didn't always speak out about stuff, and because I was just quite quiet, and there were people that were louder and would talk more, and I think it's really good to recognise that actually, like, that's okay. Not everybody has to speak out, and I remember being told kind of later in my career within teaching that one of my strengths was that I didn't just ramble all the time. Like, actually, I just waited. I was fine with quiet until I had something sensible to say. So it kind of became a strength down the line. So I think that is a really good piece of advice to give a young person, in this case, young Mike.
Were you quiet as an 8-year-old Mike, or do you think you were not quiet enough, and actually you would tell 8-year-old you to quieten down a bit?
It's hard because, as you probably understand, Matt, I grew up in quite a noisy household. There was a lot of energy in that household. So I think... Just for the benefit of the listeners, one of 4 brothers? 4 brothers, yeah. And probably amongst the quietest of those 4. And, yeah, I probably was quite quiet. But I think I could have been, I could have appreciated that a bit more. And not
maybe that's the question I should have asked.
Not seen it as a negative thing.
Yeah. And actually you're giving yourself permission to be quiet.
Maybe not as an 8-year-old, maybe as a kind of teenager and stuff.
It is an interesting one, though, because where does that come from, that idea that quiet is like, that we should have to speak up and be louder, and it's weird, isn't it, that's kind of out there? Do you think that's specifically a male thing, that actually, it's like, oh, boys should be loud and dirty and smelly? Where does that come from? That it like
I'm going to let Mike go at that whilst I think about it, because I think that's a really good question, and I'm trying to form an answer. Mike, have you got a view on that?
I don't know. That might come down to the environment you grow up in. I mean, as I said, one of 4 brothers. It was quite an active, sporty household. I was always a bit of a bookworm, but would also go out and play sports, not so well. And that, maybe it is a boy thing, but maybe if you grew up with a sister or as an only child, it might be different. If you look at my friends with sisters and who are only children, they're a bit less raucous, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Kind of an environment thing rather than a nature.
I definitely do agree, Brad, that actually probably is a thing, that there's an expectation on boys that they won't be quiet. I won't overshare at this point, but I filled out an assessment today for a young boy about how he processes the world and things. And I put on there that I work in education, just for the background. And I put on there that actually, he is quiet. He does prefer smaller social groups. And he would kind of be noted as a play alongside rather than play with. But also that I wasn't concerned about any of that, because it seemed actually like normal, natural, healthy behaviour when you look at it for what it is, outside of the expectations that he'll be this alpha male that's in every football team and runs out and high-fives all the other kids in the playground. That actually, when you look at it as it is, he's pretty happy. He's not causing any harm, but he is quieter and he's less sociable. But I think that's all right.
Yeah, I like it. I like the fact that you touched on that it might impact upon somebody's confidence, actually. I think that's really a useful thing for people to just be aware of. Right, well,
I bet 8-year-old Mike is absolutely loving us having this conversation whilst he's sat there thinking, shut up.
Quieting down, you lot. Well, he's off now anyways. He's heard enough. So 18-year-old Mike's coming in, though. Is there anything that you'd like to say to him, Mike?
I'd probably take two things. One's related to 8-year-old Mike and one's related to slightly older Mike. Would drink less. It became a huge problem for me later in life. I think some of that to start off with was being quiet and wanting to be more outgoing, and it became a problem later in life. And the other thing I'd say is something I discovered quite recently was just to pause just one beat before saying anything to anyone, just to think about what you're saying. And some of the stupid things I have come out with in my life have just stopped by just thinking, I think that sounds funny. But I'm just being a bit of an arse. So those two things, just pause before saying anything. Think, is the thing I'm saying stupid or not? And I think that could have made for just a slightly calmer life.
Yeah, cool. That's interesting, and it goes the point you said about drinking less and that being a means to be a little bit more outgoing. Again, I can relate to that. I used to, as an 18-year-old, I wasn't particularly confident. So I would kind of, I'd want a bit of that Dutch courage. But it kind of links to what we were talking about before, doesn't it? Because actually, if an 8-year-old who's quiet, if that's not, if we can build an 8-year-old that's just quiet, it's confidence, then they don't need to find another way to have that kind of outgoingness. It's okay that actually so that there are naturally people who are quieter, there are people that sit in the middle, there are people that are louder, I think that relates quite nicely. And yeah, I think probably 18-year-old needs to pause, every 18-year-old needs to pause a beat, don't they, before they open their mouths.
For the benefit of the listeners, I was nodding my head profusely then, Bradley, when you were talking about actually, that getting into the 8-year-old's mindset and not changing his behaviour one jot, but just giving him permission to be quiet does help to iron out the 18-year-old's need to feel like he can be extroverted and out there. I just thought that was a really good point you made.
I agree that if you could bring that confidence up, that would have been a different 18-year-old than perhaps if you'd had that at 8. Yeah.
And I think that's what I like, because there'll be hopefully there'll be men listening that are those quieter types now, and just to hear that, hear us in that idea of talking to 8-year-old Mike and 18-year-old Mike, but even if that's like a 41-year-old that's listening, that just happens to be quiet, and recognise. That's okay. I can be quiet and I can be confident and I am me and that's all right. I can go about my life in my world and enjoy that. I don't need to be anything else.
Do you know what else, Mike? I promise I'll let you talk in a minute. But something else that I feel strongly about is that men's mental health is a problem. It's a problem for men, but it can be contributed to and helped by everyone. And so actually, whilst we talk about men that might feel the way that Mike felt, also I think if there are mums listening that have a son who is quiet, who is 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, that actually if you could concentrate on, instead of trying to bring him out of his shell and make him more extroverted, actually if you could concentrate on giving him permission to be quiet, that is the thing that would build his confidence, and that's the thing that would help iron out potential problems in later life that Mike alluded to. Mike, do you feel the same about like that?
Again, it's funny, and kind of bring back to the present day. Often I'll be a bit of a, I'll crap on, I'll be a real chatterbox, and then we'll go quiet, and somebody goes, "Is everything right? You're really quiet." So it's like, right, you have a go at me when I'm jabbering on. You have a go at me when I'm quiet. Sometimes, just let people be a little bit. And certainly as a kid growing up, you can overthink things and question things. If you're kind of being told the way you are isn't quite, if you need to be more talkative, whereas, if you can be told that it's quite okay to sit quietly or you don't have to have these ongoing conversations. It'd be positive.
And
Very
I think
astute.
sometimes that quietness. I always think, if you think about it from a kind of relationship point of view, it takes time to build up that comfort around the silence. And that tends to be, I think, I kind of think, a marker for when you're really comfortable with somebody, whether that's a relationship or a friendship. That actually you recognise you don't have to fill all the gaps. It can just be quiet, and that's okay. And I don't need to know what that person's thinking, and they don't need to know what I'm thinking, and that's okay. So I think it's a good marker as well. I think just for people to be aware of that, and I think there's a comfort in that. That actually, I think there's a closeness of being able to be quiet around people.
I'm going to, again, echo one of Mike's life experiences that I was fortunate enough to share. So I said to you, Brad, that Mike and I used to go on holiday with a big group of us to the Lake District. And we'd spend a week in a house that was far too small for the number of people that were there. And in actual fact, it would be busier and noisier and more conversation at the start of the week than the end of the week. And I feel like it was the end of the week because it's this blissful place that was very, very close to nature. It still had TV and Wi-Fi and things, but you could feel like it was more remote if you chose to tune into that side of it. And it was the end of the week when actually people quietened down. And actually, I think that was probably a symptom of people feeling more comfortable in each other's company. And maybe the noisiness was a symptom of not actually having not seen each other for a little while and then being lumped back in together. And that was a symptom of maybe unfamiliarity. But as the week went by, towards the end of the week, there was a lot more quietness, a lot more kind of contemplation going on. Was that how you saw it?
No, I think that is quite true. But I also think that same holiday, Matt, Steph and I now rent a cottage 300 yards up the lane on our own because we got to a point where we just said, it's just too noisy for us. We'll come down and join in and we'll escape. But yeah, it was. The beginning of the week was always raucous, and towards the end it got, again, people more comfortable and a bit less showy-offy with each other, and you caught up and you didn't have to be like, everything's got to be 100 miles an hour. And I think, and again, some of that's like getting older where you're more comfortable saying what you want to do and you don't have to, not everyone has to do everything together all the time. And but again, that's why Steph and I took ourselves off to a little cottage up the road, which is peaceful.
And then from a men's mental health perspective, I think that ties in so much with this wretched concept of alpha males being the ones that are loud and brash and competitive and the centre of attention. And actually, I really feel like true masculinity is about the ability to be quiet and the ability to be content and secure enough to not need to shout and show off.
If you can say, this is what makes me happy, and it's not being raucous, and you can say that to other people, this is too noisy for me, I'm not enjoying it. Well, you don't even have to say, I'm not enjoying it, this is not my cup of tea, I'm going to go and sit outside quietly and not be bothered, and it's not because I'm grumpy, and it's not because I don't like you, it's just because, you got that confidence to say...
That's how you do your thing.
Yeah.
That's lovely, Mike.
I think that takes a real confidence as well. I could definitely sit in a situation that I just not really enjoying just to be polite or whatever. But actually, there's a lot of confidence to be able to say, no, I'm going to go and do this now because that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Right. Mike, 18-year-old U's off. And slowly sloping in through the doorway is 80-year-old Mike. You've got 1 minute to have a conversation with him. Is there anything that you'd like to say, to ask? How would that conversation go?
It's going to sound really corny, but 80-year-old me is going to tell me not to change a thing. All the errors, all the mistakes, everything. I've got to a point where I'm quite happy, and all of that has made me who I am today, who is reasonably happy, I guess, and content, and has had some amazing experiences and made some amazing friends. And, through those errors and mistakes, which I'd have lived a different life and maybe I wouldn't have had. And I don't know, 18-year-old me would have done it differently, but 80-year-old me went, okay, you screwed stuff up, but some stuff you must have got right. And maybe those mistakes were part of it. and that's what led you to living on the edge of the Peak District in your mid-40s, doing a fairly menial but quite enjoyable and worthy job, surrounded by close friends and the countryside. And
I think it's worth just painting the picture that presumably for you, Mike, that's a dream come true, because I know there are some people that would hate the idea of living in a rural location or a semi-rural location and the Peak District. But for someone like you, that's very much life goals being achieved.
It's and we always say it's a very quiet life. We live a very sheltered life with a very small group of friends, but it's actually really nice. It's not especially challenging, but it's fun. We have a lot of, and it's a beautiful place to live, and it's the right pace of life. And and that's absolutely perfect for me. And it took a little while to reach here. Maybe some of those mistakes along the way are part of what got me here, and got me on a slightly kind of more level kind of even keel.
Mike, I'm really concerned that that this podcast might be the equivalent of taking a picture of a beautiful unspoilt beach and then posting it to social media, and then hordes of dickheads descending on that beautiful unspoilt beach and then spoiling it. So I don't want people to suddenly move to your location.
I didn't say the name of it, did I? Undisclosed location on the edge of the Peak District.
You said it's near where the water comes from. Is it Ice Valley where the water comes from? Is it that one?
It is Ice Valley, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Or Evian.
Just around the corner from.
Well, what was the Coca-Cola one? Desani? Is that where you live?
No, I live in Perrier.
Oh, very nice, Mike.
Nice. Cool. Well, I think that's a really nice note to end on, Mike. Actually, just the idea that 80-year-old you is like, we don't change anything. We have got to where we've got, and you're happy and content with that. And it certainly sounds like you're kind of living a life that suits you, and ultimately I think that's what life's about, isn't it? It's not about fitting into any sort of mold. It's about kind of creating the life that we want, and it sounds like you've done that. So it's been great to hear from you, and it's been an interesting journey. We're gonna come to some takeaways, I think, Matt. I'm looking at you now.
Well, before we do, we need to present Mike with his fish and chips that has
of course
been delivered.
I wondered who that was knocking at the door. I didn't want to answer because that guy with all the tattoos on his face was freaking me out. But I'll go and get your fish and chips.
Yeah, you better had. Yeah, so my key takeaway from that, Mike, and I'll give you a takeaway that I'm sort of taking from this conversation. Brad will give you his, and then if there's anything that you've realised, because I think often we don't. I know you knew all the stuff that you've just told us, clearly, because you were the one that it happened to, and it's all from your perspective. But if the reflection has helped you to realise anything, we'd love to hear that as well. My key takeaway is how powerful it is that you have got these series of sustainable self-preservation techniques. And you mentioned things like using alcohol previously to excess, and that actually, I think a lot of people use alcohol as a coping mechanism or as a tool or as a device rather than just enjoying the consumption of it, like really using it. Whereas now you really seem to be in a place it's noteworthy that, and I've said before, that I thought when you came on the camera you just looked like a vision of health and wellness. And also you're practicing all these really sustainable self-preservation techniques, like having a routine in place, like your passion for literature, and like your knowledge of like local places with the pub and the bookshop and those routine places that you have discovered kind of fill you up a bit, or just top up that positive feeling in you, and the huge positive benefit that's given you. And that's, I think, something that I could look to apply to my life, and that our listeners could look to apply to their life, of just, looking for coping mechanisms, self-preservation techniques, call it what you will, but the ones that are sustainable rather than the ones that are not sustainable. That would be my takeaway. Bradders, did you pick up a takeaway? Not just the fish and chips?
I did. I really liked when you talked about about routine helping the chaos. And I think, whatever anyone listening to this podcast will have their own thing that's going on, their own element of chaos that, ultimately when they get to 80-year-old, they may well look back on like you and be like, yeah, that was okay. That, maybe wouldn't have chosen it at the time, but actually that's made me who I am today. And I think that is quite a helpful takeaway, that routine helps chaos, because there's lots of different scenarios where life just happens to us and things can feel chaotic. And actually when we feel things are chaotic, then we tend to feel out of control. And with that kind of out of control can bring anxiety and fear and all of those horrible emotions into it. But I think routine is quite a good way to settle some of that. And again, echoing like what you picked up, Matt, that actually, let's make those positive changes and positive things to our routine. But if it's all kicking off, I think getting some elements of routine to life, some control that you can have, I think is a really valuable takeaway. So that would be my key one from this evening, definitely.
Thanks, Bradders. Mike, was there anything that sprang to mind for you?
I think kind of sitting down and talking to your chaps about it, and kind of thinking about it and thinking about the kind of the chaos it was and how it was very deliberate and thought through steps that had to get me from that to where I am now, and how that and continuing that kind of thought through process. So everything I mentioned the buses earlier. I'll crap on about the buses. It was a very
tell me about the buses.
Just the 199 was just too chaotic, even though it was cheaper and more frequent. So I switched to the 358, which takes longer and it's more expensive. And it's less frequent, but it's just a nicer experience and a nicer way to start and finish my day. But I thought it through, and everything like that is kind of thinking it through to make those little bits of my day easier. But that all came from a very deliberate having to think through what I wanted to do with the moving. And when I came up here without a job and thinking what I wanted to do and knowing what I didn't want to do, and finding somewhere that I was happy and kind of fitted in work, and that I had, enough to keep me happy up here. But again, those little routines like the bus and just making those things that you have to do each day a bit more comfortable, and then the rest of it kind of falling into place.
Mike, I'm not taking the piss. And I've just noticed that I haven't sworn on the podcast yet, and I'm the one that's bad for it. So maybe I need to cut out me saying taking the piss. Who knows? I'm going to have an episode that I didn't have to put the explicit thing on. Piss. Anyway. I genuinely, I think it's underrated when people go through that kind of thought process, because I think you get practices like mindfulness, which is, people stopping and taking stock of their lives, either in the split second moment or on a far longer term scale. But I really feel like that as an abstract concept is less useful and less applicable than people who think, which bus shall I catch, and what's the impact going to be on me? And I think that's really applicable example of the benefits of mindfulness, that actually stopping to think about how is this going to benefit me? Just thinking through what the outcome of both is going to be. Okay, well, I prefer that outcome, so I'm going to go that way. And I just think things like that get wrapped up and sold back to us as mindfulness or whatever else it might be. But I think that you're a living example of those things in everyday guise rather than in fancy bullshitty guise. I've sworn again. But yeah, that's my take on that.
I love the bus bit. It's almost given me another takeaway in a sense. I love the bus analogy because I often talk to people about actually whatever is in front of you right now that you're dealing with, you're probably going to get to the destination that you need to, but there is always two buses. And one of those buses is an uncomfortable, not very nice route, tends to be fogged in negative thinking. And one of those buses is a more positive one. You probably get to the same place. You still get to work, whichever bus you take, but actually that one you enjoy more because it suits you more. And I think having that, it kind of is testament to the life that you've created and that contentment that actually you're in a position to be able to reflect on, I would rather get that bus. I would rather spend a little bit more money and the journey take a little bit longer because that is more valuable to me as a person. And not very often, I think, in life do we reflect in that way on little things, medium things, big things. So just to be able to step back and actually think, well, what do I want? What do I want out of this? Is it just about getting from A to B, or is it about me enjoying the journey and enjoying the ride?
Hit the nail on the head. It's also a double decker, so
nice.
Oh.
Nice.
Do you go top deck?
Even better.
Yeah. Oh,
At the front?
yeah.
Pretend you're driving?
Every morning, yeah.
Mike, I'm going to wrap up and say, genuinely, you're a friend of mine, so it's lovely to see you and speak to you again. But B, our hope with this podcast is that these conversations, which require almost no preparation, but I really think they can, have a positive impact on those of us that are having those conversations. But the real hope is that we inspire, or is that a dirty word now? That we encourage other people, not just men, but that we encourage other people to have these kinds of conversations, because they're actually quite easy conversations to have, but just those opportunities for reflection can be really valuable. So thank you ever so much for coming on, sharing your perspective on things, and I genuinely think it's going to be really, really beneficial for those people that are listening.
Thanks, Matt.
Pleasure.
Cool. Yeah, I'll echo that. Now he's done the nice roundup. Thanks for coming on, Mike. It's been really great just to chat. Just to chat to you and hear about your experiences. It's nice. I enjoy it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
And for those listening, because Mike likes routine so much, he's going to be a guest every show now. Because we can't break that routine, so it's just Matt, Brad, and Mike from now on. Right, chaps, should we call it there?
Yeah.
Okay, good shit.
Cool, Mike. Thanks.